The Long Silence. West Berlin, Federal Republic of Germany. April 19, 1973. The silence was heavier than the secrets. For 10 years, Elias Thorne had lived with the sound of the Atlantic explosion ringing in his memory. A sound masked to the world by a simple, fabricated report of a boiler failure. Elias was no longer a field agent. He was a consultant for a think tank, technically based in Bonn, but living out of a small, nondescript apartment in Schöneberg, West Berlin. The Berlin Wall, the physical embodiment of the Cold War, stood only a mile away, a constant, ugly reminder of the division he had fought to prevent. He poured himself a generous measure of scotch. His study was lined with old maps and files. The Project Kronos dossier, the blueprints for the U-2540, was kept in a double-locked, fireproof safe. He still looked for patterns in the 15.3-second pulse, convinced the frequency was part of a larger, systemic code. His relative peace was shattered by the headline of the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung lying on his table. Vogel, industrialist, dies in alpine climbing accident. Dr. Klaus Vogel. Elias knew the name instantly. Vogel wasn't just an industrialist. He was the last known survivor of Richter's immediate inner circle who hadn't been captured or liquidated. He was the brilliant thermodynamic engineer who designed the closed-cycle engine that powered the U-2540 for 17 years. He had escaped the purge through Operation Paperclip, trading his brilliance for amnesty, and now ran a sprawling conglomerate that manufactured everything from precision optics to jet turbine components. Elias had always suspected Vogel was the repository for the dead-hand algorithm, the ultimate doomsday contingency. Alpine accident, Elias muttered, pouring another drink. Vogel couldn't climb a flight of stairs without breathing heavily. A knock on the door, timid but persistent, interrupted him. It was a young man in a neat, threadbare suit, a solicitor from a prestigious Zurich firm. "Mr. Thorne?" the solicitor asked in flawless English. "I have a package for you, from Dr. Vogel." Elias took the heavy, sealed envelope. "Why me? I didn't know Dr. Vogel." His final will and testament contained a specific instruction, the solicitor replied, looking nervous. If Dr. Vogel died under any circumstances outside of natural causes at home, this package was to be delivered to the Keeper of the Quiet War. The name provided was yours. The solicitor bowed and quickly left, clearly eager to be rid of the burden. Elias locked the door and ripped open the envelope. Inside was a key and a microfiche slide, tucked into a small velvet-lined box. The key was ornate, fashioned from dark, oxidized steel. He held the microfiche up to the light. It wasn't a blueprint. It was a complex, interlocking mathematical equation, scribed in German engineering notation. It was a cipher. The next piece of the puzzle. The ghost in the static. October 24, 1962. 3 days earlier. Langley, Virginia. CIA headquarters, the Blue Room. Elias Thorne lit his fifth cigarette of the hour, the smoke curling up to join the gray haze hovering over the bullpen. At 42, Elias looked 10 years older. He had the face of a man who had seen too much during the OSS days in Berlin, and the eyes of a man who hadn't slept since Kennedy went on television 2 days ago to announce the blockade of Cuba. The room was a chaos of ringing phones, teletype clatter, and men in white shirts shouting acronyms. DEFCO2 had just been declared. Strategic Air Command was dispersing bombers. The world was holding its breath. Elias, however, wasn't looking at Cuba. He was looking at a frequency that shouldn't exist. "You're staring at the ghost again, Elias," a voice said. Elias didn't look up. He adjusted the game on his oscilloscope. "It's not a ghost, Miller. It's a pattern." Jack Miller, a young analyst fresh out of Yale, with a tie that was too wide and a clearance that was too high, leaned over Elias's shoulder. "The NSA boys say it's atmospheric interference, sunspots, or maybe a Soviet fishing trawler with a bad alternator. The NSA boys wouldn't know a cipher if it bit them on the ass," Elias muttered. He tapped the glowing green line on the screen. "Look at the interval. 15.3 seconds. Then a burst. Then silence for exactly 4 minutes. Then it repeats. Nature doesn't keep time, Jack. Men do." "So? It's a Soviet sub. The Atlantic is full of them right now." "No," Elias said, finally looking up. His eyes were intense. "Soviet subs use burst transmission on VLF frequencies to talk to Moscow. This signal isn't VLF. It's high frequency, short range. And the encryption? I've never seen it before. It's not Cyrillic based." Miller sighed, checking his watch. "Elias, the director wants a briefing on the ballistic missiles in San Cristobal in 20 minutes. Drop the ghost signal. We have real nukes 90 miles off Florida." Elias snubbed out his cigarette. "That's exactly why this matters. This signal originates from the Sargasso Sea. It's sitting right in the middle of the blockade line, but it's stationary. It hasn't moved an inch in 48 hours. Maybe it's a buoy. At 2,000 feet deep?" Elias stood up, grabbing his jacket. "I'm going to the archives." Miller blinked. "Now? The world might end tonight, and you're going to the basement to read old files?" "If I'm right, Jack," Elias said, pausing at the door, "the world isn't going to end because of what Khrushchev does. It's going to end because of what we missed in 1945. The archives were located 3 levels down, in a temperature-controlled vault that smelled of old paper and decaying acetate. Elias bypassed the main stacks and went straight to the Z files, captured German intelligence from the fall of the Third Reich. Elias had been there. Berlin, May 1945. He had been part of the team racing the Soviets to grab Nazi scientists, Operation Paperclip. Everyone knew about Werner von Braun and the rockets, but there were other projects, darker projects. He pulled a heavy, dust-coated box labeled Project Kronos. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it.
Inside were yellowed blueprints, grainy photographs, and transcripts of interrogations with Kriegsmarine officers who were later hanged or disappeared into the Soviet Gulag.
The Midgard Trust. Geneva, Switzerland, April 21, 1973. Elena met Elias at the Geneva airport. She wore a tailored suit that defined her authority, but her eyes held the same sharp intensity Elias remembered. "Welcome back to the trenches," she said, shaking his hand, the familiarity tempered by a decade of separation. "How bad is it?" Elias asked, as they drove through the orderly, wealth-laden streets. "The Midgard Trust holds approximately $4 billion in untraceable assets," Elena explained. "If they execute a simultaneous withdrawal across key markets, Frankfurt, London, New York, it won't just be a recession. It will shatter confidence in the global currency exchange. The Soviets and the Americans would blame each other. Detente collapses, and the world economy reverts to barter." "Richter's masterpiece," Elias observed grimly. "The war that costs nothing, but yields total chaos." They arrived at the imposing limestone facade of the Schweizerische Kreditgesellschaft. Elias presented Vogel's will and the archaic iron key to the chief security officer, who ushered them into a sub-level vault. The key unlocked a small, unassuming safety deposit box. Inside, there was no more money or gold. There was only a single heavy object, wrapped in oilskin. Elias unwrapped it. It was a pocket watch, a stunning piece of Swiss precision, but strangely heavy. "The watchmaker's signature," Elena murmured. Elias opened the back of the watch. Instead of clockwork gears, the mechanism housed a minuscule high-capacity magnetic core memory unit, cutting-edge tech in 1973. "It's the final activation code," Elias realized. Richter didn't trust paper. He encoded the launch sequence onto this. "How do we read it?" "We don't," Elias said, snapping the watch shut. "If we put this near any unshielded magnetic field, a CIA computer, a telex machine, we risk activating the sequence. We have to find the rest of the network." "We already found them," Elena said, stepping to the side and pointing through the small glass window of the vault into the main lobby. A tall, impeccably dressed man in his late 50s was waiting patiently by the reception desk. He had the same cold, assessing eyes as Richter, and a faint, almost invisible scar tracing the line of his jaw. "That's Rudolf Hessler," Elena whispered, "Vogel's protege and the current CEO of Midgard Trust. He's the one pulling the strings." As if sensing their presence, Hessler turned his head and looked directly through the thick glass of the vault door, his expression entirely devoid of surprise. He offered a slight, mocking bow. Then he walked out of the bank and disappeared into the Geneva traffic. "He knew we were coming," Elias realized. "He let Vogel die to lure us here. He wanted us to retrieve the watch. Why?" Elias looked down at the coded watch in his hand. "Because the final part of the dead hand sequence isn't automated, Elena. It requires a human entry, and that human is now either us or him. The war wasn't over. It had just moved from the ocean floor to the global banking network. and Elias Thorne now held the detonator. The cipher in the gears. Geneva, Switzerland. Safe House, April 21, 1973. Elias and Elena huddled in a sparse, secure apartment above a quiet Swiss clockmaker's shop, its rhythmic ticking providing an ironically calm backdrop to the looming global crisis. They had laid out the pocket watch and its contents, the magnetic core memory unit, under a high-powered lamp. The watch wasn't just a container. It was a piece of proprietary Nazi-era technology, an artifact of Richter's specialized knowledge. "This is not a simple code, Elias," Elena said, adjusting her glasses as she examined the delicate wiring. "It is an authentication key. The mainframe, wherever Hessler has it hidden, is running the Midgard algorithm continuously. It's waiting for three things: the timing formula from Fogel, the capital liquidity point, and this key," Elias summarized. "Precisely," Elena confirmed. "This unit contains the specific geolocation lock and the final permutation sequence. Without this physical piece, the mainframe will detect an unauthorized entry and wipe the entire memory core. Hessler lured us here because he needs this watch to complete the protocol, but he can't risk retrieving it himself." Elias ran a hand through his hair. "So he's playing a waiting game. He knows we can't destroy it for fear of triggering a catastrophic failsafe, and we can't hold it forever. He's expecting us to make the first mistake," Elena agreed. "The markets open in New York in exactly 8 hours. That is the critical liquidity window for the final sell-off. He will make his move before then. If we can't destroy the key, we need to find the lock." Elias picked up the phone and dialed a scrambled number. After 3 secure relays, Ari's voice, now gravelly and sounding far away, answered. "I am retired American. I am fishing in the Mediterranean. Leave me to my tranquility." "The tranquility is about to be shattered by a global economic depression, Ari," Elias countered, holding the watch tight. "Richter's second act is about to drop. We have the final key, but the vault is still closed. We need to know where Hessler is setting up his terminal." Ari paused. "Hessler, the quiet one. He wasn't the scientist. He was the quartermaster. He knows all the bolt holes and the cash flow." "Where would a man like that hide a 1970s mainframe computer in Switzerland?" Elias asked. "Not a bank vault, too obvious. Not a university, too many students," Ari mused. "Think government. Think paranoia. Before the Cold War, the Swiss built bunkers for their entire federal council. Deep, hardened facilities connected to the nation's earliest telecommunication lines. They are decommissioned now. He would use one of those." Ari gave Elias 3 possible coordinates: decommissioned Swiss military installations near Bern. "I will be in Bern in 4 hours," Ari promised.
I will handle the perimeter. You handle the watch.
The digital rat line. Bern, Switzerland, 3 a.m. The 3 targets were spread across the hilly, dense forest outside the Swiss capital. Elias and Elena, driving a rented Fiat, reached the third and most promising location. An access road that terminated at a heavily reinforced concrete facade, marked only with faded National Service emblems. The Bundesrat telecommunications bunker, Elena confirmed, reviewing the blueprints Airy had relayed. It was decommissioned in 1968. It still has direct lines to the European telex hub. That's how he's doing it, Elias realized. Coordinating the cell orders. The telex network is the digital rat line. They bypass the rudimentary electronic locks using a small, specialized device provided by Airy. The interior of the bunker smelled of mildew and stale air. They followed the thick, braided power cables deeper into the complex. The sound of high-speed magnetic tape spools spinning, a rhythmic, whirring shh, grew louder. They found him in the main communications room. Rudolf Hessler sat before a massive IBM System 370 mainframe, its indicator lights blinking furiously. Magnetic tape reels were whipping back and forth on their drives. The room was cold, loud, and entirely focused on the glowing console. "I expected you," Hessler said calmly, without turning from the console. His voice was precise, laced with a smooth, upper-class German accent. "Vogel sent us the key," Elias said, stepping into the room, Elena at his side. Hessler finally turned. He looked pleased. Of course, Vogel was a sentimental fool. He wanted me to have the legacy. He knew I needed the watch to complete the sequence, and he knew I wouldn't risk capture to retrieve it from the bank. "You killed him," Elena accused. "I merely accelerated his retirement," Hessler shrugged. He was getting weak. He was a liability to the Midgard vision. Hessler pointed to a small, custom-built slot on the console, designed exactly to house the magnetic core memory unit. "The mainframe is running the final test permutations. It has identified the exact second when the New York market opens. I only need to insert the watch and press execute." "You won't get away with this," Hessler warned. "Get away?" Hessler chuckled, a dry, cold sound. "I am not trying to get away, Mr. Thorne. I am fulfilling the vision. The Americans and the Russians will blame each other for the collapse. They will withdraw into protectionism. Their alliances will fray, and the Third Reich, the real Reich, the economic one, will rise from the ashes of their paper economies. T-minus 1 hour 45 minutes until New York market open." Final permutation. Elias lunged. Hessler was faster, grabbing a heavy steel crank handle and swinging it at Elias's head. Elias dodged, the handle slicing through the air with a sickening whoosh. Elena ignored the fight. She sprinted to the mainframe console, aiming for the reel-to-reel tape drives which held the bulk of the Midgard Trust cell orders. "If you damage the tapes, the system will execute the emergency sell-off," Hessler shouted, wrestling with Elias. "It's programmed for total system integrity." Elias drove Hessler against a metal cabinet. "Where is the override, Hessler?" "There is none, only the key. Give me the watch." Hessler smashed Elias back into the console, momentarily stunning him. Hessler scrambled to the control panel, his hand reaching for the watch slot. Elena screamed. She realized the truth. The magnetic core unit in the watch didn't just contain the final sequence. It contained the only shutdown code that Richter had devised. Hessler needed it, but if Elena could insert it first, she might be able to halt the program. "I need the watch, Elias, now!" Elias rolled off the floor, dodging a kick from Hessler. He slid the pocket watch across the steel floor toward Elena. Hessler, seeing the watch slide, abandoned the fight and dove for the terminal. Elena grabbed the watch and, with agonizing speed, aligned the core unit with the slot. Hessler slammed into her, knocking the watch loose. It skittered across the floor, crashing against a baseboard near the power supply. Hessler pinned Elena, his hands locking around her throat. "The American game ends now." Elias grabbed the crank handle Hessler had dropped. He didn't aim for Hessler. He aimed for the spinning magnetic tape drives of the IBM. Crash! The heavy steel handle ripped through the first drive, shredding the magnetic tape. The system lights went from green to flashing red. The rhythmic shush turned into a digitized scream. "No, you fool!" Hessler roared, releasing Elena and turning on Elias. The sound of the tearing tape and the shrieking machine gave Elias an idea. He looked down at the watch, sitting near the high-voltage power lines feeding the mainframe. "The power!" Elias yelled to Elena. "If we overload the memory unit before he can insert it, we might scramble the authentication sequence." Hessler charged, but Elena, scrambling back to her feet, kicked a heavy metal stool into his legs, sending him crashing to the floor. Elias grabbed the watch. The air around the exposed power conduits was humming with static electricity. He held the watch, the magnetic core, directly against the conduit. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a blue spark jumped from the conduit to the watch. The heavy case of the watch glowed, heated by the sudden surge of current. The delicate memory core inside was instantly fried, its data scrambled into static noise. The Man Who Saved the World. October 27, 1962. Aboard Soviet submarine B-59. Seconds after the ASROC launch, the ocean screamed. The explosion of the American rocket-assisted torpedo didn't hit the B-59, nor did it hit the rising Nazi buoy directly. It detonated in the water column between them, creating a massive cavity of superheated steam and a shock wave that slammed into the Soviet submarine like the fist of God. Inside the control room, men were thrown across the deck. Light bulbs shattered, raining glass onto the charts. The hull groaned, a terrifying high-pitched screech of metal being compressed beyond its limits. Captain Savitsky scrambled to his knees, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. The red emergency lights swung wildly, casting long, dancing shadows. "They have missed!" Savitsky screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "They fired, and they missed! They are reloading! We must fire now! Target the carrier! Target the carrier!" He lunged for the firing panel, inserting his key. "Maslenikov, turn your key!"
The political officer, Maslenikov, pale and shaking, fumbled for the key around his neck. Do it, or we all die, Savitsky roared. Stop. The word was spoken softly, but it carried more weight than the depth charges. Vasily Arkhipov stood by the periscope stand. He had been knocked down, but he had risen with an eerie, unnatural calm. "We are not firing," Arkhipov said. "This is mutiny," Savitsky shouted, his hand trembling on the key. "We are under attack. The Americans have initiated war." "If they wanted to kill us, Captain, we would be dead," Arkhipov said, stepping between Savitsky and the console. "That explosion? It was too small for a direct attack. It was an intercept. They were shooting at something else." "There is nothing else," Savitsky spat. "Only us and the imperialist dogs." "Listen," Arkhipov commanded. The bridge fell silent, save for the dripping of condensation and the ragged breathing of the crew. Through the hull, reverberating through the water, came a sound. Not an explosion, not a propeller. It was a mechanical grinding, a deep hydraulic moan that seemed to come from the crushing dark below them. Grind, clank, hiss. "Sonar," Arkhipov said, not taking his eyes off the captain. "What is that?" The sonar operator, clutching his bleeding ears, pressed the headphones back on. His eyes went wide. "Captain, it is below us. Depth 2,000 feet. Massive cavitation. It sounds like missile doors opening." Savitsky froze. "Missile doors? An American sub?" "No," Arkhipov said, realizing the truth of the voice he had heard over the underwater telephone just moments ago. The woman's voice, a third party. "Blow all ballast tanks," Arkhipov ordered. "Emergency surface, now." "But the Americans!" "Surface," Arkhipov barked, his voice finally rising to a command shout that brooked no argument. "We are going up to talk to them, because whatever is down there, it is the enemy of us all."
The Blind Exit. Bern Bunker, Switzerland, 4 a.m., April 22, 1973. Elias and Elena stood before the smoking side door Hessler had used. The heavy steel crank was jammed in the lock, securing the pair inside the bunker. "He locked us in," Elias said, kicking the door. "It's not designed to hold a serious breach," Elena noted, examining the mechanism. "It's an emergency escape, not a fortification. The lock is brittle." Elias picked up the steel crank handle he had used to smash the mainframe. 3 violent, controlled strikes against the locking plate shattered the brittle mechanism. They pulled the door open, revealing a narrow, damp, concrete tunnel leading steeply downward. "Ari is at the primary entrance," Elias said. "He'll be cut off. We have to assume this exit leads somewhere remote." The tunnel smelled of earth, oil, and mineral salts. They ran, their footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. Elias led the way, his Colt .45 drawn. "He's slowing down," Elena noted, pointing to a smear of fresh mud on the concrete. "He's wounded or struggling." Minutes later, they found evidence of Hessler's desperation. Wedged into a grate was a sheaf of papers, hastily discarded. It was a financial ledger, thick and bound in leather. Elias grabbed it. "This is it.
The Midgard Trust accounts. He flipped it open, his eyes scanning the elegant German script. It wasn't just bank transfers. The final pages detailed the liquidation of the $4 billion in assets, converted entirely into a single physical commodity: gold bullion. He didn't just plan a collapse, Elias realized. He planned a reset. He converted the world's panic into physical wealth, the ultimate hedge against chaos. "Where is it?" Elena asked, peering over his shoulder. "It's listed as a single shipment, Operation Nibelung. Departure from Zurich Freight Terminal, ETA, Italian border crossing, in 2 hours." The tunnel opened abruptly into the bracing cold of the early morning. They were standing on a narrow, forested mountain slope, overlooking a winding, single-track railway line. "The train," Elias said. "He's heading for the train line. He's trying to escape with the physical assets." A single, muffled gunshot echoed from the forest to their right, the direction of the access road. "Ari," Elena whispered, urgency tightening her face. He found Ari. The last train. They sprinted down the slope, crashing through dense pine thickets until they reached the graveled maintenance road running parallel to the tracks. Ari was sitting on the ground beside his vehicle, clutching his shoulder. A neat, precise bullet wound bled heavily through his tweed jacket. "He shot me," Ari grunted, his face pale with pain and rage. "The son of a viper. He was waiting in the forest near the primary exit. He used a suppressed rifle." "Can you drive?" Elias asked, kneeling beside him. "I can reload," Ari snapped. "He passed me 10 minutes ago, heading down the line. There's a small freight yard 2 kilometers south. They stage trains there before the climb to the border tunnels." "The gold is on a train," Elias informed him, shoving the ledger into his pocket. "Operation Nibelung." Ari's eyes widened even through the pain. The Old Norse mythology, the treasure of the dwarfs. Richter was always so dramatic. He is trying to take the Reichsbank with him. "We need a car," Elias said. "Take mine," Ari said, handing Elias the keys. "It's a fast car, American. But Hessler has had 20 minutes head start. He'll be ready." Elias slammed the accelerator, the powerful engine of Ari's sedan whining on the narrow, winding track. Elena gripped the dash, her eyes focused on the railroad tracks ahead. The small, dark freight yard appeared through the morning mist, nestled in the valley floor. It was a scene of industrial decay. Rust-colored rail cars, a single locomotive idling, and a few dark figures moving quickly under the yard lights. "There he is," Elena said. Hessler, wearing a heavy overcoat despite the chase, was scrambling up the ladder of a sealed boxcar, an old-fashioned high-capacity car typically used for precious cargo. The boxcar was attached directly behind the locomotive. He reached the roof of the boxcar and turned, raising a flare gun. He fired a red signal flare into the sky. "He's telling the engineer to move," Elias shouted, skidding the car to a stop near the tracks. They burst out of the car. The idling diesel locomotive immediately gave a deafening blast of its horn, and the massive wheels began to grind forward, pulling the train slowly out of the yard. "Stop the train!" Elias yelled. "Impossible!" Elena shouted over the noise. "The locomotive is shielded. We have to get on to that boxcar." Hessler appeared on the roof of the boxcar again. He wasn't holding the flare gun this time. He was holding a small, dull-colored device. He's placing an explosive charge, Elias realized. He's going to blow the track behind him. The train was moving faster now, accelerating toward the mountain pass. Elias took a running leap onto the rear coupling of the final empty rail car. He found the manual brake wheel and began cranking it desperately, slowing the last car. Elena followed, scrambling up the ladder beside him. "We have to get to the front car," Elias said, climbing over the roof of the first car. "The coupling between the locomotive and the gold car is where he'll place the final charge."
The Nibelung's treasure. The wind roared in their ears as they scaled the roofs of the freight cars. They moved in the shadows, the rising sun just beginning to paint the Swiss peaks in gold. Hessler was at the coupling point, working feverishly. He placed a package, a thick block of military-grade C4, against the heavy steel coupling between the locomotive and the sealed gold car. "Stop, Hessler!" Elias yelled, reaching the roof of the gold car. Hessler turned, a wire spooling from the explosive block in his hand. He wasn't armed with a gun now. He was armed with a dead man's switch. "Too late, Mr. Thorne," Hessler cried, his voice triumphant over the train noise. "The Midgard Trust will survive. I will rebuild the network with gold, and you, Mr. Thorne, will be buried under a mountain of steel." He dropped the spool. The wire connected the explosive to a small detonator box in his hand. Elias sprinted across the roof. Hessler backed away, keeping the distance, his finger hovering over the detonator button. "The gold is worthless without the network," Elias argued. "We destroyed the algorithm. We destroyed the mainframe. It's just metal, Hessler." "Metal that buys power," Hessler screamed. He stopped at the edge of the roof. There was nowhere else to go. The next stop was the locomotive. Elias launched himself across the gap between the cars. He tackled Hessler, sending them both crashing onto the roof. The detonator box skidded across the metal and stopped inches from the edge. They wrestled, two men fueled by a decade of hatred and conflicting ideologies. Hessler was strong, driven by mania, but Elias had the desperation of a man who had already failed to stop one explosion. Elias slammed Hessler's head against the roof, momentarily stunning him. He lunged for the detonator, but Hessler grabbed his wrist. "You won't have the last word, American," Hessler screamed, thrashing wildly. Suddenly, Elena appeared. She saw the detonator, the struggle, and the live charge on the coupling. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed a handful of fine ballast from the roof and flung it straight into Hessler's eyes. Hessler cried out, momentarily blinded. Elias seized the advantage, smashing Hessler's head one last time against the steel. Hessler went limp. Elias grabbed the detonator and, with trembling hands, quickly tore the wires from the connection point. The C4 charge was neutralized. The train rattled and thundered into the first mountain tunnel. Elias sat on the roof of the train, watching the smoke from the tunnel envelop them. Elena stood beside him, holding the limp body of Rudolf Hessler. "He's alive," Elena confirmed, checking his pulse. "Barely." They had the gold. They had the last leader of the Midgard network. They had the final ledger. The economic war was over. The ledger. Zurich, Switzerland. 1 week later. The gold train was stopped and the bullion secured by Swiss authorities, quietly and without publicity. The $4 billion was eventually traced and absorbed into various international funds, erasing the final financial footprint of the Third Reich's economic contingency plan. Hessler, severely injured but alive, was whisked away to a maximum security CIA black site. Under intense interrogation by Elias, he revealed the location of the final archives, a mountain repository in Bavaria, Germany. Elias and Elena flew to Germany. The repository contained not just the original Dead Hand blueprints, but every document related to Project Kronos, the Cobalt bomb, and every asset, shell company, and sleeper agent that Richter had ever commanded. The archives were systematically dismantled, translated, and destroyed. The threat of the Götterdämmerung was truly over. Elias and Elena met one last time in a safe house near the Zurich lakefront. "It's over, Elias," Elena said. "We won the quiet war." "Did we?" Elias looked out at the lake. "We erased the technology. We destroyed the formula. But the idea, Elena, the idea that chaos can be weaponized against trust itself, that idea is still out there, and it doesn't need a Nazi to execute it." Elena nodded, understanding the truth in his words. The fundamental fragility of the world they had fought to protect remained. "What now?" she asked. "Now," Elias said, "we make sure the secrets stay buried. We tell the same lie we've told for a decade." They toasted with cheap Swiss wine to the lies that protected the truth. Ari, recovering in an Israeli hospital, received the ledger, containing the full list of Midgard members still alive in Europe. He sent Elias one final coded message. "The keeper has done his job. The shepherd will finish his." The purge of the remaining financial and political sleeper agents began quietly across Europe in the ensuing months, managed entirely by Ari and his network, ensuring the Midgard Trust would never rise again. Elias returned to his consultancy in Bonn, a ghost carrying the weight of two saved worlds. The only sound was the long, heavy silence of a truly secret victory. The Moscow Thaw. Moscow, Russian Federation, August 1991. The air in Moscow smelled of dust, change, and vodka. The Soviet Union was collapsing, and with its demise came a sudden, chaotic deluge of declassified documents. The formerly impenetrable archives of the KGB and the Soviet Navy were being opened to historians, scavengers, and foreign intelligence with reckless speed. Dr. Anya Volkov was a young, ambitious historian specializing in Cold War naval doctrine. She sat shivering in a dimly lit vast archive near Podolsk, surrounded by towering stacks of brittle paper and moth-eaten uniforms. She was searching for a thesis topic, something profound that had been overlooked. She found it under a brittle folder marked Top Secret, Foxtrot B-59. Anya meticulously examined the captain's log from the infamous October 27, 1962 incident, the day the submarine was nearly destroyed by U.S. signaling charges. The log entries were contradictory. Captain Savitsky's handwriting was shaky, detailing his intent to fire the nuclear torpedo. But the subsequent entries, clearly written by Chief of Staff Vasily Arkhipov, contained a highly unusual addendum. Explosion confirmed, not an attack, but an interception. Communication established with U.S. vessel. Code word third party confirmed.
Hostile action prevented by joint necessity. Log amended. Action taken against unlisted hostile contact at depth 2,000 feet. Anya frowned. The official Soviet history matched the U.S. version. The B-59 was forced to surface due to battery failure and near mutiny, not a joint military action against a third party. What unlisted hostile contact could have necessitated a ceasefire between two nuclear-armed submarines? She cross-referenced the log with the ship's communication transcript, a garbled, partially burned telex. The Russian translation of the final, desperate message from the USS Connie was clear. A remnant weapon. We are firing to destroy it, not you. Do not return fire. A Nazi weapon. A third force. It was madness. It was history. Anya realized she was holding the key to the greatest untold story of the Cuban Missile Crisis. She carefully photographed the log with her small camera, knowing that if she published this, she would shatter the carefully constructed piece of the last 3 decades. The New England Vigil. Kennebunkport, Maine, USA, September 1991. Elias Thorne was 72, silver-haired, and spent his days sailing the chilly New England coast, the closest thing he had to peace. He was a retired naval historian, his official biography scrubbed clean of any CIA involvement. The scars on his soul the only record of the quiet war. His solitude was shattered by a secure call that connected through a scrambler unit hidden in his old fishing shack. The voice was instantly recognizable. "Elias, we have a problem." Elias said, his voice instantly dropping back into the calm cadence of an operative. "It's been too quiet. What's wrong?" "Moscow." Elena, now a directorate-level analyst in Langley, confirmed. "The archives are a sieve. The B-59 log is out. A Russian historian found the third-party reference and the interception amendment." Elias closed his eyes. 30 years of silence, unraveling in the chaotic dust of a collapsed empire. What about the Connie logs? They still read navigational hazard, but the historian, a Dr. Volkov, is already contacting the press. She has proof of the Arkhipov amendment. The American media will be tearing down the Pentagon doors by Christmas. "Let them," Elias said wearily. "The world knows Arkhipov saved them. Now they'll know how. It's a risk, but the core secret, the cobalt bomb, Richter, the Midgard Trust, that stays buried." "It gets worse," Elena warned. "Dr. Volkov isn't the only one digging. A young, aggressive investigative journalist from D.C., Sarah Jensen, has been hitting the Freedom of Information Act hard on the Kennedy files. She found the unexplained expenditure for deep-sea recovery and the rushed transport log from Buenos Aires in 1962. She's close to connecting the dots, Elias realized. She's asking for an interview with the only surviving CIA field officer listed on the periphery of the B-59 investigation, the man who supposedly retired early in '63 due to stress. She wants to talk to me. She knows where you live, Elias. She's due in Maine tomorrow.
The heat in Buenos Aires was different from D.C. It was heavy, smelling of roasting meat, diesel fumes, and jasmine. Elias Thorne sat at a small, rusting iron table outside a cafe in the San Telmo district. He wore a linen suit that was already clinging to his back. He wasn't Elias Thorne here. His passport said he was Arthur Miller, a Canadian machinery importer. Across the table, Elena Petrova looked effortlessly cool in a sundress and large sunglasses, smoking a thin cigarette. "We are being watched," she said, not moving her lips, her eyes scanning the reflection in her compact mirror. "I know," Elias murmured, turning the page of La Nación. Two men, gray Ford Falcon across the street, and the beggar on the corner who has been counting the same coins for 20 minutes. Local intelligence or friends of our target? In this city, Elena, there's no difference. Argentina in the 1960s was a sanctuary. After the fall of the Third Reich, Juan Perón's government had opened its arms to thousands of fleeing Germans. They brought gold, expertise, and their ideology. Even though Eichmann had been snatched by the Mossad 2 years earlier, the network, Die Spinne, the spider, was still intact, and it was paranoid. The manifest from the flight listed our suspect as Victor Caron, Elias said. He landed 3 days ago. He checked into the Alver Palace Hotel, stayed 1 night, and then vanished. "A man like that doesn't vanish," Elena corrected. "He goes underground. He goes to the Kameraden." Elias signaled the waiter for the check. "We have a lead. The taxi driver who picked him up from the hotel. I tracked him down this morning. He dropped Mr. Caron off at a heavy industrial complex in the Boca district. It's a shipping warehouse listed under Andromeda Imports." "Andromeda," Elena mused. "The chained lady. A bit dramatic. Let's go see what they're importing." The slaughterhouse, La Boca district, midnight. The warehouse sat on the edge of the Riachuelo River, the water black and oily. The air reeked of the nearby slaughterhouses that gave the district its gritty reputation. Elias cut the wire fence with silent precision. He and Elena moved through the shadows of the shipping containers. There were guards, men patrolling with Dobermans. These weren't standard night watchmen. They carried MP-40 submachine guns, relics of the war, but perfectly maintained. "German weapons," Elias whispered. "We're in the right place." They reached the main hangar. A side door was locked, but Elena picked it in 10 seconds with a hairpin. They slipped inside. The interior was vast, illuminated by hanging arc lights. But it wasn't a warehouse for grain or beef. It was a workshop. In the center of the floor stood a massive metallic cylinder, partially disassembled. Technicians in white lab coats were working on it. Sparks flew from welders. Elias pulled out a miniature Monox camera and snapped photos. "That's not a submarine part," Elena whispered, squinting. "That's a centrifuge for enriching uranium." They aren't just launching old weapons, Elias realized, a cold pit forming in his stomach. They are building new ones. The U-boat was just the delivery system. They are manufacturing the warheads here. Suddenly, a klaxon wailed. A floodlight swept over their position on the catwalk. "Eindringenle, oben auf dem Laufsteg." "Intruders, up on the catwalk." "Run!" Elias shouted. Bullets sparked off the metal railing as they sprinted. Below, the guards were scrambling up the ladders. Elias pulled his suppressed Colt 45 and fired twice, dropping the lead guard. They burst through a fire exit onto the loading dock, only to find their path blocked by the gray Ford Falcon they had seen earlier. 2 men stepped out. They didn't look like Nazis. They looked like bureaucrats. "Get in the car,"
the driver said in perfect English with an Israeli accent. Elias hesitated, gun raised. "If we wanted you dead, American, you wouldn't have made it past the fence," the man said. "The police are coming, the local police who are on the Nazi payroll. Get in." Elias looked at Elena. She nodded. They dove into the back seat. The Ford screeched away just as a truckload of armed guards burst from the warehouse gates. The man who had rescued them poured 3 glasses of harsh brandy. He was short, balding, and looked like an accountant, but his hands were calloused and dangerous. "I am Ari," the man said. "Mossad." "I figured," Elias said, nursing the drink. "You've been tailing us since the airport. We have been watching Andromeda imports for 6 months," Ari said. "We want the man running it, Colonel Hans Richter." "Richter," Elias said. "The rocket engineer?" "The butcher of Peenemünde," Ari corrected. "He used slave labor to build the V2s. We thought he died in 1945, but he is here. And the man you followed, Victor Caron, that is his courier." "Courier for what?" Elena asked. Ari threw a folder on the table. It contained photos of electronic components, guidance chips, miniaturized triggers, things they can't make in Argentina. They are buying them in the U.S. and smuggling them down here. "The U-boat," Elias said. "The U-2540. It was a test, wasn't it?" "It was a demonstration," Ari said. "Richter is trying to sell a product, a doomsday weapon to the highest bidder. He tried to trigger a war between the U.S. and Russia to show the world that his dead hand system works. He wants to sell the technology to China or Egypt. If Egypt gets nuclear missiles," Elias started, "then Israel ceases to exist," Ari finished, "which is why we are going to kill him tonight." "No," Elias said firmly. Ari stared at him. "Excuse me?" "You kill him and the technology disappears. His network goes underground with the blueprints. I need to find the archive. I need to know where the other sleepers are. I don't care about your archive, CIA. I care about justice." "Justice won't stop a mushroom cloud over Tel Aviv," Elena interjected. "Richter is a fanatic. He has a contingency plan. If he dies, does another signal go out? Does another sub launch?" Ari paused. The logic held. "Fine," Ari said. "What do you propose?" "Richter is hosting a gala tomorrow night at the German club," Elias said, pointing to an invitation in Ari's file. "A fundraiser for war orphans. We go in, we get close, we make him tell us where the control center is." "And then?" Ari asked. "Then," Elias said, "you can have him."
The ticking of the algorithm. London, United Kingdom, September 2008. The summer of 2008 was a time of mounting financial anxiety, but what happened on a Tuesday morning in September went beyond anxiety. It was instantaneous, digital terror. The London Stock Exchange experienced a flash crash, an unexplained, lightning-fast collapse where billions in capital vanished in seconds, far outstripping the known instability of the housing crisis. It was quickly dismissed by regulators as an anomaly, a glitch caused by high-frequency trading programs running amok.
But Sarah Jensen, now a celebrated investigative author and historian living quietly in Manhattan, knew better. She sat in her apartment, her office plastered with photographs of the B-59, the U-2540 schematics, and the cryptic notation from Elias Thorne's curated ledger, the one containing the partial chaos formula used by Richter. The formula had always included that complex trigonometric function, RS, which calculated the exact point of market confidence failure. The crashes she was reading about in London didn't look like fear, they looked like geometry. She dug out the few remaining pages from Elias's ledger, the ones describing the mathematical fingerprint of the dead hand algorithm. She plugged the latest market volatility data into a program she'd spent years developing. The results were chilling. The signature of the London flash crash wasn't random. It was coordinated and mathematically identical to the Richter-Vogel permutations for market liquidation. The same pattern adapted for nanosecond trading. "He warned us," Sarah whispered, staring at a photograph of the elderly Elias Thorne. "He said the idea would survive." She grabbed the phone and initiated the last secured contact Elias had given her, a number that went through a dizzying array of NSA switches before reaching its target. "The quiet war, Elena. It's not over," Sarah said, her voice shaking with urgency. "Sarah, I'm retired," the voice of Elena Petrova replied, cool and measured, though now deepened by age and the weight of decades. "I'm teaching cryptology history in Virginia." "The chaos formula," Sarah insisted. "The flash crash in London, the volatility in Frankfurt. It's not just the housing bubble. Someone has rebuilt the dead hand for electronic trading. They're using the Richter algorithm to exploit the interconnectedness of the 21st century markets. They are turning the market itself into the weapon." A moment of silence passed over the secure line, heavier than any silence Elias had ever known. "Where are they hitting next?" Elena asked, her voice instantly shedding the guise of retirement. "Sarah, I'm retired," the voice of Elena Petrova replied, cool and measured, though now deaconed by age and the weight of decades. "The chaos formula," Sarah insisted. "The flash crash in London, the volatility in Frankfurt. It's not just the housing bubble. Someone has rebuilt the dead hand for electronic trading. They're using the Richter algorithm to exploit the interconnectedness of the 21st century markets. They are turning the market itself into the weapon." A moment of silence passed over the secure line, heavier than any silence Elias had ever known. "Where are they hitting next?" Elena asked, her voice instantly shedding the guise of retirement. "New York," Sarah said. "The formula predicts the catastrophic liquidity drop at the close of the market tomorrow. If they trigger the final cascade of sell orders, the electronic trading system will implode. Total economic shutdown." The interrogation. Abandoned tannery. Outskirts of Buenos Aires. Richter sat tied to a wooden chair. He wasn't scared. He looked bored. "You are wasting time," Richter rasped. "The Götterdämmerung is not a single event. It is a machine. It cannot be stopped." "Where is the control facility?" Elias asked, leaning in. "Where are you manufacturing the heavy water?" Richter spat in Elias's face. "You Americans, you hired my colleagues, von Braun, Galen. You built your moon rockets on our backs. Why are you so angry that we kept a few toys for ourselves?" "Tell me about Project Midgard," Elias said. "Midgard, the serpent that encircles the world." "Ari," Elias said, "he's yours." The Mossad agent stepped forward, opening a case of surgical instruments. "In Israel, we have very persuasive methods for Nazis, Colonel." "Wait," Richter laughed, a dry, wheezing sound. "You think pain matters? I am dying anyway. Cancer. But before I go, I wanted to see the fire one last time." "What fire?" "The Atlantic was a failure," Richter admitted. "But the Pacific, that is where the real game is." Elias grabbed Richter by the collar. "What is in the Pacific?" "A ship," Richter smiled, his teeth yellow and rotten. "A freighter, the Valkyrie. It is en route to San Francisco. It is not carrying bananas." "What is it carrying?" "A cobalt bomb," Richter whispered. "Do you know what cobalt does to a nuclear fallout, Mr. CIA? It makes the land uninhabitable for 100 years. No rebuilding, no survival." "When does it dock?" "It doesn't dock," Richter said. "It detonates in the harbor. Tomorrow at noon." Elias pulled back, horrified. "San Francisco? That's millions of people." "It is the anniversary," Richter said, his eyes glazing over with fanaticism. "November 14th, the day Germany surrendered the port of Hamburg. We are balancing the ledger." Elias turned to Ari. "We need a phone. I have to call the White House. We have 12 hours to stop a ship in the middle of the Pacific." Ari looked at Richter, then at his knife. He closed the case. "Go, make the call. I will finish this." Elias and Elena ran for the door. As they exited into the night air, a single gunshot rang out from inside the tannery. Ari walked out a moment later, wiping his hands on a rag.
"The Volkov narrative is locked," Elena reported. "She is publishing the Arkhipov story, complete with the Nazi third party. The Pentagon is scrambling to admit a limited counter-piracy operation. The world will be shocked, but safe. And Miss Jensen? She has enough to chase the technology angle for years," Elena said. "You chose well, Elias. You sacrificed the conspiracy to save the history. The world gets the truth it can handle." Elias hung up the phone. He looked at the vast churning sea. The cobalt bomb, the gold train, the dead hand algorithm, all remained buried beneath the official narrative of the Arkhipov rescue. The silence returned, but this time it was slightly cleaner. He had finally made peace with the quiet war.
The historian's burden. New York City, USA, May 2018. The passage of time had smoothed the sharp edges of the secret, but could not erase the scar. Sarah Jensen was no longer a hungry investigative reporter. She was the reigning authority on the Cold War's pivotal moments. Her book, The Third Key, Vasily Arkhipov and the Secret That Saved the World, was a Pulitzer-winning masterpiece. It told the truth Elias Thorne had authorized her to tell: the existence of the Nazi Project Kronos, the automated U-boat, the third-party signal, and the bravery of Arkhipov and the unnamed CIA agent, Thorne. The world was fascinated. Arkhipov was posthumously recognized as a global hero. The Pentagon had grudgingly confirmed the counter-piracy operation against a rogue German remnant, allowing the full redemption of Elias Thorne's public reputation. But the book was a beautifully constructed lie of omission. Sarah sat in her penthouse library, looking at the 2 locked files she still kept in her fireproof safe. One was the full, unredacted Midgard ledger, the list of global financial and industrial giants who had funded the economic doomsday. The other was the final, verified Navy report detailing the full yield and fallout radius of a Cobalt-60 device, filed on November 15, 1962. No one but Sarah knew that Elias Thorne's true heroism lay not in firing the gun, but in burying the fallout. She kept watch because the ideas, the principle of weaponized chaos, were still alive. She was haunted by the knowledge that the 2008 financial meltdown, officially attributed to greed and subprime mortgages, was mathematically influenced by the echoes of a Nazi engineer's formula. She was the keeper now, carrying the burden that had cost Elias Thorne 30 years of silence. The Last Sentinel, Northern Virginia, USA, June 2022. Elena Petrova lived out her long life with quiet dignity, retiring from the NSA in the late 1990s as a legend in cryptology. Her existence remained classified. Her past as an ex-NKVD officer who saved the West, a contradiction known only to a handful of men and women. She died peacefully at 99. Sarah Jensen attended the small private ceremony, standing beside a handful of men in dark suits who represented the highest echelons of the intelligence community. After the funeral, a retired CIA director slipped Sarah an envelope. Inside was a single laminated card. It read, "Operation Arkhipov's Rule. Status active." A single handwritten note from Elena was attached. "The algorithm is dormant, integrated into the global financial security grid. It is the Last Sentinel. Its password is found in the chaos formula itself. Protect the formula, Sarah. It is the key to the shield." Elena's final act was ensuring the ultimate protection against the chaos she and Elias had fought for decades. The solution they had created in the 1970s against the telex collapse was now a digital firewall against modern high-frequency attacks. It was the ultimate irony. The world's stability was guarded by the secrets of its deepest, quietest war.
Sarah knew then that the fight wasn't just against people like Richter and Hessler. It was against the human impulse toward self-destruction. And the countermeasure was not a missile, but a piece of code. As for Ari, the Mossad agent who administered the final justice for the Midgard Trust, his fate was never known to the public. He was a ghost before he even entered the story. Sarah received a single, thick, annual gift on her birthday. A bottle of harsh, expensive Israeli arak, delivered anonymously, accompanied by a card bearing one Hebrew word, Shomer, watcher. He was still out there, ensuring the remnants remained buried. The Cobalt Heart. Cargo Hold 3, the Valkyrie. 11:25 a.m. PST. The cargo hold was massive and temperature-controlled. In the center sat a single, massive black container bolted to the floor. It was lead-lined and featureless, except for a flashing panel on its side. Elena gasped, "My God!" It was a primitive nuclear fission device, similar to the American Fat Man, but encased in a thick shell of metal that Elias knew was Cobalt-60, the core of Richter's Götterdämmerung. On the panel, a digital display glowed. 003500. The timer was running. "The timer is mechanical," Elena said, examining the locking pins. "Richter's systems are archaic. This is not disarming it with a wire cutter." "What's the mechanism?" Elias demanded, his voice tight. "It's pressure activated. If we tamper with the shell, the core detonates instantly. It's a fail-deadly device." Ari stepped forward, setting his black case down. "This is where my training comes in. We can't disarm it. We have to blind it. We need to shield the core from the neutrons." "How?" "Lead sheets," Ari said, opening his case. "We need to peel the shell away, locate the secondary firing pin, and wrap the core in enough lead to absorb the preliminary blast. It will be partial fission, not full yield. It will still be a massive explosion, but it won't contaminate the harbor." Elias looked at the timer. 0030. "How do we open the shell without triggering the pressure release?" Elena pointed to a small, almost invisible port near the top of the casing. "There, a maintenance hatch for servicing the timer. We must use a chemical solvent to dissolve the seal, then remove the pins simultaneously." The frogmen stood guard, their faces pale beneath their dark grease paint. Elias looked at Ari and Elena. "We do this together," Elias said. "One shot. Ari, the solvents. Elena, the schematics. I'll take the pens." They worked in a desperate, silent ballet. The hold was stifling. Sweat dripped onto the metal casing. 0015. Elena had managed to decrypt the sequence of the 5 pressure pins. 3 red, 2 blue. They must be pulled in that order simultaneously, or the charge detonates. Ari finished applying the corrosive solvent to the access port seal. It smoked and hissed. Elias put his fingers on the 3 red pins.
Elena positioned herself on the tube loo. "Wait for my mark," Elias said. He was looking at the digital display, counting down to the 1-minute mark, when the core would begin its final charging sequence. 005. "Ready," Elena whispered. "Ready," Ari confirmed, holding the small lead foil packet. "Now." They pulled the 5 pins. Click, 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 click. The timer immediately reset to 0030 and began flashing red. The maintenance hatch sprung open with a loud whoosh of escaping gas.